Hi, and welcome to A Boulder View. I'm Carl Castillo. In the first half of the show, I'll be speaking with Boulder's representative to the State Senate, Rollie Heath. In the second half of the show, Jody Jacobson will be visiting with Andy Proctor to speak about updates to the city's affordable housing program. But first, here with me now is Senator Heath. Senator, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Carl. Glad to be here.
You have an impressive record of contributions that you've made to the city, the state, and even the nation. I know you began your career as a young attorney, spending 9 years in active duty in the U.S. Army. You followed that up by 35 plus years in the private sector as a community and a business leader, a lot of civic accomplishments along those ways. So I think people who know that past about you are not surprised that even though you've only been in the state senate for 2.5 years, you've managed to garner the respect of your colleagues on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, and they've come to see you as a leader, and they put you in positions of leadership. And I'm talking about some of the things that are most significant when it comes to statewide concerns, congressional redistricting, constitutional reform, looking at the long-term fiscal stability of the state. And I want to speak to you about all those issues, but before we do that, I think many of our viewers would be interested in learning what the life of a state senator is like, and particularly a senator who represents a city like Boulder.
Well, first you embarrass me, but that's awfully nice.
Much deserved.
Well, that's awfully nice. You know, I can't tell you what a privilege it is to represent Boulder. I mean, this is a phenomenal place. Josie and I and our kids moved here in 1970, and the company I was with wanted us to move in 1973 to Ohio, and the smartest thing I ever did was to say no to that and figure out a way to get another job to stay here and never have looked back. So we love this place. You know, so many of my colleagues who represent different districts have to look over their shoulder every moment, you know, how their vote's going to be received and all. And I know how Boulder is going to respond, and it gives me such liberty, and as I say, it's such a privilege to represent this great city, and as you know, it goes up, touches the northern part of Longmont, so it's, you know, a lot of Boulder County, not the west, but
it's beyond Boulder. Yeah.
It's beyond Boulder, but it's just a wonderful thing. It's a privilege, and I've loved the job. I really have.
Now, if one was to look at the pay, one would consider this to be a part-time job, but I know it's anything but. I mean, yeah. What kind of hours are you spending?
Oh, probably no different than you or any of your viewers spend. We all put a lot of time in. You don't measure. I don't think you measure any job by the number of hours you put in. You know, if you're enjoying it and you love it, you don't count the hours.
I know that this community is very demanding, and I know that you've been measuring up. So I wanted to ask you about sort of your communications with the City of Boulder and the community in terms of how is it that you go about trying to understand what your constituents want, and how do you communicate back to them the issues that you're learning? How does that work?
Well, I think, you know, I do town halls every month, and we get a good turnout. I try to move them around the city. In fact, we do one in the City Hall, as you know, and that's been great. We get somewhere between 50 and 100 people most of the time, and as you would guess in Boulder, everybody's really interested, so we do that. I think, you know, my assistant Richard Valenti, who was a reporter with the Colorado Daily, and I think people thought the world of him as a political reporter, and he's been my assistant since I started. And, you know, we get probably 300 to 500 emails during session a night, and we try to respond, and he's on the front line of that. So we do as best we can. I try to show up as often as I can to as many events as I can. I think that's my role. One that I enjoy. I think you have to love people to be in this job. And so, you know, I'm out most every night, but it's not a chore, it's a pleasure. And then people talk to you when you're there. So I enjoy that part of the job.
I'm sure you get stopped in many different places. Well, let's speak about some of the challenges that we're facing at the state. So obviously some very difficult cuts that are being proposed for both the fiscal year 2012 and even the latter half of 2011 budget. How can we measure the impacts that the Boulder community might feel? I know that the City of Boulder isn't quite as dependent on state tax dollars, but there's many other governmental organizations and community members that are beyond the City of Boulder. Can you speak towards how those impacts might be felt?
Yeah. I think most of the people that know me know that if you looked at reason why I ran, it was to try to deal with the fiscal issues of the state. We've got some problems that no other state has in terms of a constitution that, with provisions that work cross purposes with each other. We've got statutes. We have the only TABOR, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights in the country, that basically doesn't allow the assembly to do anything with taxes if you think you need to raise things. And the budget that the new governor, John Hickenlooper, introduced last week just, dramatically, I think, told us all how deep we are in trouble. We took $385 million more out of of education last year. And just so people understand, we were funding on a per pupil basis $1,400 lower than the rest of the state already. And we're now going to take that down another $500. So on average, we're spending $1,900 roughly, closer probably to $2,000 less per student in this state than we are the average of any state in the country. That is just not acceptable to me, and I would hope not acceptable to the people watching this show and my constituents, and hopefully everybody in the state of Colorado. So we need to do something about it.
And that goes for not just K through 12, but also the university?
Well, we took another $35 million out of, and the University of Colorado Denver just came out with a study. We're 49th in the country on what we're spending on higher education. So this is going to even reduce it further. So, we're not supporting higher education. We're not supporting education. If you look at a P through 20 basis, right. We're not supporting it at any level that's even close to the average of the states surrounding us or the rest of the country. That's not acceptable.
I always wonder when I hear about all these rankings saying that we're one of the most educated cities or counties or states, and yet you have these numbers that put us at the lowest level. So it just seems like it's just a matter of time before the impact is felt, and I'm sure there's already been impacts felt that are pretty significant.
It's called the Colorado paradox, and we can import people because people like to live here. I mean, right. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin, and I'm pretty typical of the people that came here and found a job here, and then, as I said earlier, found a way to stay here.
Right.
And Josie too. My wife was educated in Oregon, and I met her at Wisconsin when she got her master's. So we're very, very representative. That isn't going to continue to work, particularly at the technician level, which is where the career and technical education. Those are the kind of people we've got to grow ourselves, and these are the people that tend to not understand the necessity for staying in school. And I'm talking machinists, tool and die makers. I owned a machine shop at one point. Those are the kind of people we're not educating, and I mean, we need to do this obviously at all levels, but particularly there when we can't import those. We've got to grow them. That means we got to find a way to keep these kids in school and to educate them, and we're just not doing that right now.
Right. Well, let's turn to the future and hopefully a more optimistic topic about how we can change this. So we have such a gigantic challenge right now financially, our ability to support core services, K through 12, university, and many other important services as well. I know that you took a leadership role. You were a chair of a commission in 2009 that looked towards the issue of fiscal stability, and that you determined that there had been 50 plus years before there was a comprehensive study on our tax structure. And I know that study will be released next week. What is it that you're hoping that study allows you to do and allows the state to do?
Well, as you said, we haven't looked at the revenue of the state in 53 years, and as I alluded to earlier, we've got all kinds of constitutional issues. I think what the DU study is going to allow us to do is to step back and have a foundation to have a conversation going to the future. We debate so often as to where we are, where the problems are, and this is a nonpartisan group. It's obviously a private university that doesn't benefit from any of the funds that we have in the state, and that's why we asked them to do it. By the way, they did the study 53 years ago too, so
okay.
So it makes a little.
They have a little experience.
Yeah, a little experience makes a little sense. But I think they're going to be able to take a look at the income tax, the sales tax, all the things that we have going on with the property tax, and come back to us with, I hope, some options as to what we might do to get ourselves out of this fiscal mess that we find ourselves. So it's really not going to be as much a revenue study, although I think they will obviously their recommendations are going to have to deal with revenue, but it's going to deal with the structure. And then what I'm recommending is that because I sponsored that bill, that was Senate concurrent resolution we did last year.
Right.
What I'm going to recommend is then that the General Assembly form an interim committee to take a hard look all this summer at those recommendations, and then come back to wherever we need to go with it, but ultimately to the public and say these are the things we need to do with the structure of the tax structure of the state, and hopefully to make some changes.
Certainly don't want to just stay on the bookshelf there and get ignored.
Right.
Well, that's obviously very significant. We look forward to hearing more about that. So when we talk about the long term, we also, as you mentioned, Tabor and many other aspects of our Constitution that have been revised. I think you yourself have said to read more like a statute or a series of statutes rather than a Constitution. So of course that's an issue that we need to face to address the long-term feasibility of government in Colorado. I know that's something that's important to you, and that there's also something about reforming the initiative process that the State House is considering right now. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. I also want to go back, if you don't mind,
Sure.
and talk about the revenue thing, because we talked about the long term. Short term, we've got to raise some revenue, and I think you know that I'm probably going to present in a week or so a recommendation how we raise short-term revenue. I personally, as a state senator, as a grandfather of 2 kids in the school district here, we need to reverse what I was alluding to, where we are in the state. So I am going to come out with a recommendation that in the short term will bring us some revenue in the state and make sure that goes to education. So just so you know that.
Great. Well, that's an important point to make.
Yeah.
And then on the initiative reform, can you speak
Yes.
briefly about that?
Well, we have of all the states in the country, it's the easiest to amend the Constitution. We can amend the Constitution as easily as we can a statute. Mm-hmm. So our Senate President Brandon Schaefer has introduced a bill which just got out of the Senate, which would basically require us to get a 60% vote to amend the Constitution. It would remain at 50% for statutory changes. So I think this is a good bill. There's some controversy around it, but when you look at how easy we can put, and if you looked at our Constitution compared to the U.S. Constitution and actually read it and saw what's in it, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, it's incredible what's in it. So
right.
I think we all feel, at least I feel, that we need to have a higher rate at which we amend the Constitution than we do a statute.
Sure,
and so
sure.
we would increase that to 60%.
And I think an important aspect of it as well is that there's additional safeguards for when somebody does use an initiative to change the statutes,
Yes.
that would be more protected. It seems like a good counterbalance to raising the threshold.
What we've said is that if it is a statutory change, which the General Assembly could change, we're going to say this General Assembly can't touch it for 3 years.
Yeah.
So it provide that safeguard.
Right, okay. And the last gigantic issue that I know you've been charged with, sitting on the Commission on Congressional Redistricting.
Yes.
Good luck is all I can say. Obviously, the big challenge is trying to get some bipartisan support for something. Do you think you can do it?
Well, we're trying something very different. We're making history. We have, for the first time, going to try it during session. And we've got 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans. I'm the co-chair along with a Republican representative from the House. We start our hearings this coming weekend, and we'll be doing it for the next 4 weeks, including one in Boulder on March 15th.
Okay.
So, but we are committed as a group of 10. We've done the kumbaya and said we're gonna make this happen. So we've got till April 14th to get that done.
I think if anyone can do it, it's someone like you who has such good relationships with both sides and so much respect. So, well, we're pretty much running out of time, so we'll have to end it there. We've been speaking with Senator Rollie Heath about his representation of the City of Boulder. Rollie, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to be in communication with you, and you do us proud at the State House.
Carl, thank you very much. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it and appreciated being asked.